backpack. And then every night, too, so if you were going to sleep in a tent, 2 soldiers would actually button that tent together. Unlike a World War I tent, World War I tent didn't have a front enclosure on it. It was closed in the back, but not the front. World War II, they started enclosing both ends, where you had a complete enclosed shelter. It'd be very hard to, plus you were supposed to keep your gear and everything else in there, keep it out of the weather and dry. Very hard to maneuver around in those. You got 2 guys in there. There's no way you can stand up and get dressed or anything like you could a modern day tent today. So they weren't the best living quarters. And that same tent carries clear back to French and Indian War, Revolutionary War time also. The only difference is the color of material. It's just a cotton canvas tent with some type of a waterproofing on it. Here in this display case here, we've got, this is some fairly modern stuff from most of it East German Army. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, a lot of that stuff has come onto the market as collectibles. A lot of it pretty cheap. Next item we're coming up to over on our right is an actual deep sea diver suit. We're very fortunate to have. Got all the accessories with it, the lead belt, the lead shoes, the diver's knife, and photographs of the actual diver that donated that to us when he was young and in the service. And a recent photo, I think, from just about a year ago. He's still training divers at a school, naval school down in Florida. The helmet alone and the whole suit probably weighs several hundred pounds, so it is quite awkward, quite heavy. A few items to the next display, a few items that we have from Korea War. Korea War is web gear and stuff is very hard to distinguish from World War II because for the most part all the gear that was used in Korea was left over from World War II. So a lot of the stuff is dated the 40s, and when we get it we don't know whether it's World War II or Korea. There were a few exceptions. Once in a while we'll get a piece of equipment in dated 1952, 1953, so we can't identify that as Korean War time period, but then again, it may not have got into service until early Vietnam. Most of the early Vietnam stuff was left over from Korea manufacture. During Korea War II, I've talked to a lot of the people that drove vehicles, trucks, jeeps, and whatever. Almost all the vehicles they drove were surplus World War II leftovers that were still left over in Europe and transported to Korea. Uniforms, there are very little difference in the uniforms from Korea to from World War II. Late World War II, we went to what was called the Ike jacket, which is a short wool coat that only comes down to the waist. It has a waist cinch, either buckles on the side or buttons on cinch straps. The World War II coat was called the 4-pocket. It was basically a long suit coat, which is very similar to today's modern Class A coats, except the material was basically a raw, rough textured wool in a dark brown OD instead of the green of the modern.